Welcome to the Narrate podcast, where we aim to tell God's story with our lives. We'll be continuing to post the Sunday message each week, but we want to dive a little deeper and offer some content to supplement your life with God, and that's where our Beyond Sunday series comes in. Join Adam and Narrate staff as they provide thoughtful discussions, ideas, and interviews that go beyond the message you'll hear on Sunday.
Many of you will know that I've spent most of my professional life, rather all of my professional life, really resisting being called pastor. I've often even made the joke, if you call me pastor, I'm going to call you pastor. And to be clear, I still don't want to be called pastor. I don't want any of those titles put in front of my name. But that's more cultural, I think, than it is respecting the office. Something's changed in me, and that something is I've grown to respect something called ordination. And so here what I want to do is just speak a little bit to ordination, because as we continue down this what is Anglicanism track, one of the things that you'll find is Anglicanism has a more broad or a more specific imagination for ordination. I think the best way to make sense of it is to talk about a wedding I recently attended. It was almost a perfect wedding. I mean, the setting was beautiful, the weather was nearly perfect, the crowd by my standards was just right. It was sub 100 people. Not so few that it gets weird, but not so many that you get lost. The food was just spot on. The beer was free. Everything was very planned, but not overly controlled. In my view, it was, again, like a perfect wedding. There was one part that stood out to me that I still enjoyed, but it got me thinking about ordination. That something was when the non-denominational pastor who led the ceremony, and he did a great job. It was a very quick ceremony per their request. I'm guessing it was no more than 10 minutes. But there was also no ceremonialism, none of the cultural things like unity candles, none of the religious things like scripture readings or even communion. It was just very straightforward, which again is fine. It seemed to match the couple and where they're at. But the part that stood out to me and really got me thinking about this was when he pronounced them husband and wife. He said, "By the power invested in me by Jesus, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Now again, I'm not scandalized by that. That's fine. But I now have ears to hear that when a pastor, when a clergy says that, they're either knowingly or unknowingly making a statement about ordination. They're kind of pushing against it. So what is ordination? Well, ordination in the simplest form is the church's formal recognition of someone called to serve as a pastor or a priest. In that sense, it's not unlike how doctors or electricians or teachers are formally certified by their profession. Historically, though, ordination is deeply rooted in the church's earliest life. The Anglican tradition, for instance, values a 3-4 order of bishops and priests and deacons, a pattern traced through what's called apostolic succession. We can find it in Scripture. We can also unfind it in Scripture. That's what makes church history so complicated. But the idea for those who hold to these concepts is that Jesus appointed the 12, who laid hands on others, who in turn laid hands on others, all the way to today. Now, different traditions interpret this differently. Rome insists that the line runs through Peter. Others hold it less literally, but still see ordination as something received, not voted on. A recognition that God calls some to specific forms of leadership, clergy leadership. Again, I've spent much of my life resisting the notion that I was called to serve as a pastor. I've always loved it. I've always had an imagination for it. I'm also grateful that mentors in my life always helped me to see that there's lots of other things I could do. But for me, this recent process of getting ordained in C4SO was about surrendering to or yielding to, giving divine consent to this notion that, yes, I in fact think I'm called to be a pastor in the sense that I function at Narrate day in and day out. This move into Anglicanism invited me to confront my apprehensions and kind of make sense of some things. So in C4SO, and in Anglicanism more generally, ordination involves making vows both to the office of a priest and to the bishop himself, someone with real authority over me. I've actually come to value that deeply, especially having someone I respect who can lead and challenge and care for me. To know that there's someone who oversees my own living and godliness and has the right to kind of pull me from office if need be. But ordination isn't just ceremonial. As Jonathan Pagan, a great church historian, once told me, in the early church, the only data point is the laying on of hands. Ministry wasn't lay-driven or democratically determined. It was apostolic. Edward Lytton adds, you can't get a democratic theology of ministry from the scriptures. It's apostolic in nature. In other words, ordination connects us to a living historic chain of faithfulness that stretches back to the apostles themselves. The service itself, my ordination service, was very formal. Robes, collars, gestures like laying on my face in front of the altar. A lot of scripted language. I was formally agreeing to things like the belief in the gospel and the scriptures and lots of authoritative things. And at first, it can seem foreign or even odd. During mine, I didn't necessarily feel warm fuzzies so much as a racing heart, deep humility, and gratitude for those who brought me to that moment. But that's the point. Like a wedding or a graduation, the formality doesn't make the moment less meaningful. It anchors it in history, giving shape and weight to the commitment being made. It was Hannah who first put to words, and her and Leslie got to be there when I was priested. Hannah put it to words well when she said, it's kind of like a wedding. We put on funny clothes, we recite funny statements, but we do that as a way of really capturing and living into the seriousness of the commitment that we're making. See, in the end, ordination isn't about spectacle or emotion. It's a public, historic, and communal way of affirming a call to pastoral leadership. It connects one's ministry to the wider church, across generations, across the world, and grounds it in accountability, continuity, and fidelity to the faith once delivered to the saints. Now, does that mean that all Anglicans insist on being called priest? No. In fact, most of my friends, not only do they not, like their congregations wouldn't even have the language for that. But it does mean that there is this deep appreciation for what it means to be called, what apostolic succession can mean, and frankly, the humility that comes from saying you're called to be a servant to a local context. Part of why I want to share this is because I look forward to the day when some of the other pastors on staff here are ordained. I think there's several that are quite likely called to it, though it's not my place to ultimately determine that. And while that doesn't mean that it's going to lead to callers or official type things around Narrate, I think in the same way graduations mean something, I think ordination means something. Or at least, in an attempt to answer the question why I've opted for an Anglican identity, this whole idea of episcopacy and the belief in this threefold order, it actually really matters to me. Thanks.
If you'd like to learn more about Narrate Church, find us online at narratechurch.org.
You can also look us up on Facebook or Instagram. Thanks for listening.